Okay, so we were discussing about the vulnerabilities, vulnerabilities in the previous class. So can someone try to recollect what vulnerability did we discuss in the previous class? We discussed about phishing attacks, phishing attacks, and also about buffer overflow attack. Okay, buffer overflow attack. So in today's class, we move on to the another three more vulnerabilities are there which we are supposed to be discussing. Okay, so one is what is called a format string attack. Next one is what is called a cross-site scripting attack, and the last one is what is called SQL injection attack. Okay, so first we move on to what basically is this format string attack. Okay, so format strings. I hope all of you know it's being used in many programming languages to insert values into a text string. Okay, so in certain cases, this particular mechanism can be abused to perform your buffer overflow attack, then execute some arbitrary code or to extract some information. Okay, so I mean, the example given here is from C language. Okay, so uh, like when we start learning C programming language, one of the first functions which we encounter is what is called printf. Printf stands for print formatted, right? Print formatted. Okay, so actually this printf, it's used to simply send a ASCII string to the standard output, that is stdout out. But then you can have some parameters associated with it. Okay, so to insert values into an output string, you use some what is called format specifiers. All of you must be familiar with all these format specifiers. They can be used as placeholders in the string and pass the values as additional parameters to the print function. Okay, so for example, okay, so you have this. You can see it here in the slide. Okay, so yeah, when you say printf directory percentage s contains percentage d files, so in this I mean you will get the output directory is having 42 files. Okay, so the percentage s, that is actually a string format specifier. Okay, so that is replaced by the value of the first variable. That is, what is the value of the first variable? Your dir underscore name. Okay, then you have what is called percentage d. Okay, so percentage d stands for decimal. Okay, and that will be replaced by the value of the second variable, that is number of files. Okay, so in this case your printf will print directory work contains 42 files. Okay, so there are actually different format specifiers corresponding to various data types and format specifier. For example, you have your percentage f for your floating point. Then if you write percentage u, that is for unsigned decimal, then percentage n will be there, which works in the opposite direction. That is, instead of reading from the specified variable, it will write to it. Okay, so the value stored in the variable is the number of bytes printed by the printf statement. Okay, so this format functions are actually very extremely useful for generating readable outputs, and it can save the programmers a lot of time by performing automatic type conversions also. But then, if this printf statement and other things, if it is not correctly being used, okay, so this printf format strings can be vulnerable to a number of attacks. Okay, so when you say printf, so it is actually like there are so many format functions involved in this printf family. For example, you have things like fprintf. Okay, fprintf is there. Then what else is there? sprintf. So many are there. You, those who are familiar with C language will be familiar. sprintf. Then I think vfprintf and vsprintf, and so many other things are there. Okay, so all these things, like all these family of format functions, they are susceptible to variable vulnerabilities. Okay, so I'll just give you an example. Okay, so you can see here, exploiting the format string vulnerabilities in C programming. Okay, so here you can see, So the format functions, yeah, you're aware that it will accept a variable number of arguments. Variable number of arguments in the sense one or more. So you can also use them to print, let's say, your hello world without any format specifier. That's what is being shown here. Okay, so character star, I mean user underscore input is equal to hello world, and it's printing the user input. Okay, so as long as your user input is guaranteed to contain no format specifiers, as how it is being shown here. Okay, the first here I'm not using any format specifier, so this is fine, no issues with it. Okay, but then if that value is being controlled by a user, so then an attacker can exploit the format string syntax to trigger a variety of dangerous behavior. Okay, so for example, the second one, what I'm showing here right now. Okay, so this string, so this does not contain any text, but it has lots of format specifiers. Okay, so here I'm using percentage x, so that's actually for hexadecimal value. Okay, so for each format specifier it encounters in the format string, so the printf will expect to find a suitable variable in its argument list. Okay, so as you know, in C program, where are the variables being stored? The variables are being stored on the stack, the stack in process memory. Okay, so when printf statement sees the first format specifier, that is first percentage x specifier, it will just look at the stack and read the first variable after the format string. Okay, so then it will be repeated for how many are there? 4 are there. So for all the 4 percentage x specifiers. Okay, so the value for the example above, it will print the hex representation of 4 values from the stack. Okay, so depending on the program and the execution context, so these could include it could be your variable values or some pointer memory addresses or some function parameters or some return addresses, or even it could be some user supplied data. Okay, so actually by crafting format strings that contain a specific number of bytes, the attackers can read memory from the arbitrary addresses. Okay, so I mean, when this particular format function or format specifier, when it's being combined with other specifiers like a percentage n or whatever, so the attacker can use it to override even specific memory locations. Okay, so they can even redirect the function pointers to a shell code, or they can even cause some sort of crash. It can even crash the application. I mean, in the case of a denial of service attack, when it gets flooded, it can, it can even cause a segmentation fault to crash an application for a denial of service attack. Okay, so this format specifiers has to be used extremely careful. So in this first case, it's not an issue because we are not using anything there. So, but in the second case, it should be used very carefully. Okay, so now coming to how to avoid these vulnerabilities. Okay, so I just mentioned that careless use of your format string functions. Okay, it can open to a variety of attacks. Okay, so the best way to eliminate these vulnerability is to properly validate the user input. Okay, so avoid passing user controlled inputs to format the functions as much as possible. Okay, so that is one way. Okay, so then when you are using you should never use your printf and its related format functions without format parameters. Okay, even when you are just printing a string literal. Okay, so I've given an example here. Okay, so printf greeting. Okay, so even for this simple one, it will not give you a syntax error or anything, but it will give you the output. But then this is actually insecure. Okay, so the secure manner in which it can be used is along with your print s percentage s format specifier. Okay, so even if the string contains unexpected format specifiers, they will not be processed, but it will be simply printed as regular characters. Okay, so even you can make use of what is called your source code scanners. Okay, so they can be used to make sure that the number of arguments passed to a format function, so that is same as the number of format specifiers in the format string. So by in all the in I mean with all these aspects, we can actually avoid the vulnerabilities to the best possible extent. Okay, so that is all about your format string attack. Okay, so how dangerous a printf statement can be with and without a format specifier, and how to avoid it to some extent. Okay, so that's what we have discussed. Okay, so this format string attack can occur when an input string's submitted data is evaluated as a command by the application. Okay, so taking advantage of this particular vulnerability, so the attacker can execute his own code, read the stack, or he can even cause a segmentation fault, crash an application down, result in when a denial of service attack happens. Okay, so then you can all these will result in compromising the security or stability of the system. Okay, so that's what your format string attack is all about. Okay, so next moving on to what is called cross-site scripting attacks. Cross-site scripting attacks, which is also called XSS, cross-site scripting attacks. Okay, so this is actually due to sloppy software, whatever is written for your web server. Okay, so a website is said to have a cross-site scripting vulnerability if it is inadvertently includes malicious scripts crafted by an attacker in the page returned to it. Okay, so for example is being given here. Okay, so actually this social networking sites with web interfaces, okay, they are actually the most vulnerable targets for your cross-site scripting attack. Okay, so all that attacker needs to do is to embed a malicious script on the page that is being contributed by that particular person. Okay, so when other subscribers to this particular site downloads the page, so they will also be downloading the malicious script. Okay, so that is what basically happens. Okay, and most probably this the malicious script will be in JavaScript, and it will run on the user's browser, assuming JavaScript is enabled. In case your user's browser has got JavaScript enabled, so as a result, the script will read the cookies containing the login information or of the user browser, and then it will redirect them to a site whatever is being decided by the attacker. Okay, so that's what basically happens. Okay, cross-site scripting attacks. Okay, so there are two types of cross-site scripting attacks. One is what is called the persistent cross-site scripting attack, and the second one is what is called non-persistent scripting attack. Okay, so first one is persistent scripting attack. Okay, so this actually the malicious code or the script on the web page is being saved on the web server. Okay, so when an innocent user downloads a web page, the malicious script executes on the user's browser. Okay, for example, so people have the habit of updating their profile in social networking site. Okay, so these profiles may be read or downloaded by other users through their browsers, and they become a victim to your XSS attack. Okay, so that's persistent XSS attack. The next one is non-persistent XSS attack. Okay, so this is actually a little more, you can say, subtle attack. So the attacker will not do any permanent change to a website, but then they can still catch hold of the valuable personal information from the victim. Okay, so so you are actually, it exploits the fact that some servers echo back certain user response, user input back to the client without validating it. Okay, so actually, you study the response of the web server to different inputs requested from the server. Okay, many a times the input received from the user, it will be echoed back to the server. For example, it's written here, the user may be asked for personal details in an HTML form. Okay, sometimes he will enter his name as Prashant. The server will then respond, hello Prashant. Okay, so what happens here is the server has echoed back his name. Okay, so so instead of Prashant, if the user enters this sort of a script, what happens? Okay, so the server actually should recognize that this is actually a JavaScript, and it should filter. But then many a times what happens to it is a large number of web servers simply will echo back the response to the user. Okay, so I mean, if the JavaScript is not disabled on the user's browser, so definitely this particular script will be executed, and an alert box with alert message will be displayed on the web page. Okay, so so that's what happens in a non persistent XSS attack. Okay, so now coming to how to overcome your cross-site scripting attacks. How to overcome this? So yeah, rather than just echoing back the response to the user, so it is always important to validate and filter all the user input. Okay, so again, where should it be done? That should also be considered at the client end or at the server end. Second is, another strategy is to, there are two ways. One is blacklisting and another one is whitelisting. Okay, so blacklisting all the user inputs that should be filtered out. For example, a single quote, double quote, angular brackets, all these things should not appear in the email addresses input from the user. So all these should be blacklisted. Okay, so then again, yeah, so such all these inputs should be treated as invalid. Okay, so but then actually this can easily be defeated by the attackers who try to circumvent the filter by encoding the characters using some Unicode or some other representation. But then you can control all these aspects to some extent. Then another approach is what is called your whitelist approach. Whitelisting. Okay, whitelist by through the use of what is called a regular expression. Okay, so better solution is whitelisting. That is, specify precisely what user input is expected. Okay, so this is actually accomplished by the use of what is called your regular expression. Okay, so but then writing a regular expression to handle all permissible strings, it may not be that very straightforward. Okay, so for example, writing a regular expression for an email address may be straightforward, rather than writing a regular expression for password, because password may include some extract symbols or some forbidden symbols like your quotes or angular brackets and other things. So all these aspects should be taken into consideration. So these are the various approaches for overcoming your cross-site scripting attacks. Okay. So I just told you about blacklisting and whitelisting, and I told you that in case of whitelisting, in case it is a regular expression like email address, you can easily whitelist it. You can whitelist it in the sense that you can easily write make use of a regular expression. But then when it comes to a password, it will be little more, it is not that straightforward, because password may contain angular brackets, forbidden symbols and other things. So like the server to, one possibility is for the server to HTML encode any part of the web page that is being contributed by the user, that is to be sent to the browser. Okay, so you can HTML encode them. So HTML encoding means, replacing specific characters by a code that begins with, say, ampersand. Okay, so if it is less than, if it is a less than symbol, then you can replace it by an ampersand and LT. Okay, so that way, LT. If it is greater than means, you can use ampersand and GT. Okay, so that way. Okay, so if it is double quote means you will use ampersand and GT. Okay, so the implicit understanding that what happens between the client and the server is that the HTML encoded characters received by the client from the server should be interpreted as a regular text and not as a part of any HTML tag. Okay, that's what. But then another possibility on the client side is you can completely disable the web content, that is active web content, whatever comes with your JavaScript. But then that may not be a practical solution, because JavaScript is something which is being used by a number of users, and it has got very rich dynamic web content. So I mean, it will not be adopted by a number of users. Okay, so these are the different ways of overcoming your client side, cross-site scripting attack. Now, finally coming to what is called your SQL injection. Okay, SQL. So SQL is something which you're all familiar with. Structured query language. Okay, so before I tell you what this SQL injection is all about, okay, so you are aware that when it comes to multi-tier web applications, so web applications will be having three tiers. What are the three tiers involved in it? So one, you have the web application tier, sorry, web tier, then the application tier, and the database tier. Okay, so it is actually the web tier that interacts directly with the application layer, so which in turn interfaces with the database tier. Okay, so what will this database tier contain? What will this database tier contain? So this database tier actually contains the database, or DBMS, database management system. Okay, so when you say DBMS or database, so immediately the RDBMS picture will come to your mind. Relational DBMS picture will come to your mind with rows and columns. Okay, so with rows and columns, that is rows, you would have called it by the name tables. In total, you would have called it as a relation. Tables or tuples. I mean, columns are called attributes. Attributes, or attributes. That's what the column is. Okay, so you would have already created a table and seen what it is. And okay, let me see. Okay, don't have the pen with me today. Okay. So you would have already created table, student ID. Okay, table is here. Fine. So let's say student ID, okay, name, department. Okay, so I'm writing something. Okay, so name is, let's say, Mr. Brown, belongs to CSE department. Okay, Jack, belonging to, say, EC department. Okay, so this is how a table looks like. Okay, this is how a table looks like. The rows are called records or whatever. Okay, so the relation. Okay, tables or relation. Okay, relations will have this attributes and tuples. Okay, so this is what is called a relational schema. Okay, so now let's say the university website will permit its students to view their registration status and information and grade information, provided they log in with their current student ID and password. Okay, let's say there is one more, can I, okay. Let's say there is one more thing, column called password. Okay, so let's say one more column called password. Okay, so if the students enter with their correct student ID and password, okay, so the university web server, so that will present a web page containing a form to the user. Okay, so that form will extract the personal information from the user. Here in this case, it will be the student ID and the password. Okay, so this input, when it is being entered by the user, so it will be passed to the server as form parameters. when the user submits the, when the user presses the form's submit button. Okay, so this form parameters, okay, I'll show you before coming to this. So the form parameters may be passed in the body of a HTTP post request. All these things you would have learned in under some web technology subject or under DBMS, not under web technology, under DBMS. Okay, so alternate, I mean, that is what form parameters may be passed in the body of the HTTP post request. Okay, so alternatively, they may be passed as a query string. You can see query string in an extended URL to the server. Okay, something what is being shown here. Okay, so you can see here. Okay, so the server application will retrieve the form parameters and then uses them to build a SQL query. SQL query like what is being given down here. Okay, so select student ID, comma GPA from student 10. Okay, where S underscore ID is equal to this and password is equal to this. Okay, so you can see here the SQL keywords. These are the SQL. SQL stands for structured query language. These are the SQL keywords that are displayed in bold font. Okay, so the the attributes is what is being shown here in the italics. Okay, so the user input is what is being shown as underline. Okay, so yeah, I'll just show you different cases. Okay, so this is a let's go to the next one. There are 3 cases. Okay, this is what I just showed you. Okay, so now this is a sample query built from the inputs which is being supplied by the attacker. That is, select S underscore ID, comma GPA from student 09, where S underscore ID is equal to 123 and password is equal to this. Okay, so the last part of the where clause, the last part of this where clause in this particular query will be true. Okay, so even if the first 2 predicates are false, okay, you have an or here. Okay, so that or will ensure that the clause evaluates to true because the conjunction of the first 2 clauses is evaluated first. So consequently, the tuple of the student with the student ID 123 will be returned to the attacker. Okay, so what we are seeing is it's possible for a user, in the case out here, or a malicious user or anybody, to trick the system into revealing more than it should possibly reveal. Okay, so this has been made possible by the user entering part of an SQL command as an input parameter. Okay, so you are changing the semantics of the original SQL query. Okay, so this particular attack is what is called your SQL injection attack. Okay, SQL injection attack. Okay, so now I'll show you another case of SQL injection attack. So you can see here. So this is a quote free. There is no quotes. A quote free input entered by the attacker. Okay, so the SQL query generated by this input is what is being shown here. Okay, so here, so you can see this part. This is what I'm telling. So previously we had this. Now it is this. Okay, so okay, so the first part of the where clause is, what is the first part of the where clause? That is S underscore ID is equal to 123 or 1 equal to 1. Okay, the second part of the clause will always be true. Okay, and hence the clause evaluates to true. Okay, moreover, you can see that this clause is having followed by symbols, this dash dash. What does this indicate? It indicates the start of a comment. Comment. Okay, so everything after this comment will be ignored. Okay, so everything after this comment will be ignored. So merely filtering out the code symbol will not be enough. Okay, then okay, so you can see here a third case, a third example. So here the first part of the where clause, contains a second SQL statement. You can see here. Okay, followed by a comment symbol. Okay, so that's what first part is having another second SQL statement, that is drop table student 09 followed by this comment symbol. Followed by this comment symbol. Okay, so this statement will cause the entire table named, what is the name of the table, student 09, okay, to be dropped from the database. Okay, so it will be dropped from the database. Okay, so this is what happens. So these are all cases of SQL injection attacks. Okay, so what are the remedies or defense against your SQL injection attacks? Okay, so I mean, user validation is very, very important. Be it your buffer overflow attack or cross-site scripting attack or your SQL injection attack, user input validation is very, very important. Okay, so I mean, comprehensive data sanitization. Websites must filter all the user input. Okay, for example, the email address should be filtered to allow only characters allowed in the email address. Okay, so you can even pass the user input and reject inputs with symbols like a single quote, double quote, semicolon. Okay, but then, yeah, the input string containing 1 equal to 1. Okay, so which appeared in one of the previous queries, what we just showed, what I just showed you now here. Here you can see 1 equal to 1. Okay, so those kinds of cases, it may not get filtered out. Okay, so but then many other things can be taken care of. Okay, so the defense can catch most attempts to sneak the SQL through the web channel. Okay, another one is use a web application firewall. Okay, a popular example is free open source module called Mod Security. Okay, so Mod Security provides a sophisticated and ever evolving set of rules to filter potentially dangerous web requests. Okay, so then third one is limit database privileges by context. Okay, so you can create multiple database user accounts with the minimum levels of privilege for their usage environment. Okay, for example, the code behind a login page should query the database using an account limited only to the relevant credentials table. Okay, so this way, a breach through this channel cannot be leveraged to compromise the entire database. Okay, so all these are the different ways or defense against your SQL injection. Okay, so that actually completes our unit. Okay, so today we discussed about format string attack. Then we also discussed about what is it? What was the second one? Cross-site scripting attack. Cross-site scripting attack, and then we also discussed about your SQL injection attack. Okay, so with this, we come to an end of this unit. So there is one small topic called virtual elections, which I had already given as a assignment. I think 1 or 2 weeks back, I gave it as an assignment, but hardly few have responded. So do submit it in another 2 more days, 1 or 2 more days. You please submit it. I do understand the difficulties faced by different students, but then from your end, you please somehow ensure that the particular assignment is being completed. Okay, so remaining things, I think the PPT has been shared. Sarthak, can you just check and tell whether the question bank is being shared for all the units? Is Sarthak there in class? Sarthak? Sarthak is not there. Okay. Is a chat here? Ah, yes, Sarthak. Sarthak, you please get into our GCR, Google Classroom, and then check whether the materials are being given for all the 5 units, whether question bank is being provided for all the 5 units. You please check and text me back in the WhatsApp. Okay, so that anything pending, I can upload it by the end of the day. Okay, so meanwhile, you please answer your attendance. Was network security a boring subject? Can
No,
someone give a
no, ma'am.
Okay. The thing was, it's actually a very, very interesting subject. I was feeling bad because there was no lab attached to it. I wish it was a paper with a lab attached. Then we could have had a little more practical outlook towards whatever was happening. All these SQL injection and all these things can be demonstrated, demonstrated and learned practically. So using Java and other programming languages, many of the things, many of the techniques, encryption techniques or hashing techniques, everything. If we had a hands-on lab attached with it, maybe it would have been even more interesting. Actually, otherwise, the subject is actually something of very much importance. Web security and your not just web security, network security as such. And it's one of the most, uh, an area which is gaining a lot of importance, even in career, job wise, career wise, and research wise. Everywhere it's gaining a lot of attention. Network security, cyber security. So my request is, don't just look it from the examination point of view. Just try to learn something which is being given in the question bank and vomit it out for the exam. So do look at the subject beyond that. So that will generate a lot of interest. You can do a lot of projects and other things. And it's actually a very interesting area. Okay. Rizwan has put interesting subject, Mama. Thank you, Rizwan. Okay, Sarthak, I think question bank is missing, ma'am. Which question? Can you just list out which unit question bank is missing, Sarthak? Unit wise, it should have been posted. Otherwise, I will. You just put unit wise units for which the question bank is not available. Put that in the WhatsApp group also, so that even after the class is over, I can look at it and post it accordingly.